You know, there are some ideas that are so powerful they change everything. And human rights, that's one of them. It's this incredible promise of dignity for every single person, no matter who they are or where they're from. But here's the thing. It's also a promise that has been broken again and again in some of the most brutal ways imaginable.
So, let's just stop and think about that for a second. What rights do you have right now just for being human? Seriously, not because of where you live or what you do for a living, but simply because you exist. What are they? Well, the answer is actually incredibly simple, but also profound. Human rights are exactly what we just said. They're the rights you have simply for being human. That's it. No government gives them to you, which means no government can truly take them away. They are your birthright. It all comes down to a fundamental respect for each and every person.
But, and this is the big but, just as we get our heads around this beautiful idea, we crash right into a much darker reality. This quote, we have to work sort of the dark side, if you will. That's the justification, isn't it? It's the excuse people make to ignore all those ideals. It's the moment the promise gets broken.
Okay, so to really understand how things go so wrong, we first have to get a solid grip on the promise itself. Let's dig into the core principles that make this idea so, well, so revolutionary.
So, these rights have some really key characteristics. They're meant to be absolute. First off, they're universal. That means for everyone, everywhere, no exceptions. They're also inviolable, which is a fancy way of saying they can't be taken from you. In fact, you can't even give them up. That's called indispensability. And they never expire. The whole package works together to protect a person's dignity. Now, an idea this big doesn't just pop up overnight. You can actually see it evolving through history. You have the Enlightenment, which really hammered home this idea that we're all equal just because we're human. Then comes the French Revolution, with its huge ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity. But the real turning point? It was after the absolute horror of World War II. That's when the world said never again and created the United Nations, finally putting it all down on paper in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So you see, this promise has deep, deep roots. Okay, so we've established the promise. Now, let's look at one of the most devastating ways it was ever broken. We're talking about the Transatlantic Slave Trade. And it's crucial to understand this wasn't really about a grand ideology. It was built on something much simpler and much colder: profit. This quote, it just lays the whole motive bare, doesn't it? Europe had a massive sweet tooth. They wanted sugar, and lots of it. To make that sugar profitable, the cost of labor in the Americas had to be driven down to basically zero. And what was the solution? A workforce that could be treated as disposable. It started as pure economics, a business decision, one that unleashed centuries of unimaginable suffering.
And this wasn't just random, it was a system, a brutally efficient engine of exploitation called the triangular trade. Think of it as a three-step cycle. Step 1. Ships sail from Europe to Africa loaded with goods. Step 2. They trade those goods for human lives, then ship those people across the Atlantic in the nightmare of the Middle Passage. Step 3. In the Americas, they're sold and the ships are loaded up with sugar, cotton, and coffee to sell back in Europe for huge profits. It was a cycle that made a lot of people very, very rich.
But we can't just talk about systems and economics, because behind all of it are people. People like Musa. Imagine this. You're a young man, on the verge of becoming a warrior in your village. You're excited. And then one morning, everything changes. Your village is attacked by people with guns. Your spears are useless. You're captured, tied up, and forced to march away from your home, your family, everything you've ever known. In a single moment, your life is no longer your own.
Now, to keep a system this huge and this awful running, you need more than just brute force. You need what you could call an architecture of control. It's a whole framework of tools, physical, psychological, and even legal, all designed for one purpose: to strip people of their humanity. And that architecture of control, it started with the journey itself. A young woman named Lala talked about being thrown into the ship's hold. Just try to picture it. Darkness, so crowded you can't move, chained side by side. The air is unbreathable, filled with sickness and despair. It wasn't just a journey, it was an instrument of terror.
And the human cost was just staggering. On that ship across the Atlantic, it's estimated that 20 to 30% of the people captured in Africa died. Let that sink in. Nearly 1 out of every 3 people didn't even survive the journey.
And this horror wasn't just happening outside the law, it was the law. They created legal documents like the Code Noir, the Black Code, and in those texts, it was spelled out, enslaved people were not human. They were movable goods, property. This gave their masters total legal power over them, literally life and death. Any concept of human rights was erased by the stroke of a pen.
And you see the mind-setting quotes like this one from a plantation owner. He saw systematic torture not as cruelty, but as vigorous and effective methods. He wasn't punishing people, he was fighting laziness. The whip, the public punishments, it was all part of a calculated system to create constant, paralyzing fear. So you see how it was all built piece by piece? The chains, the laws, the twisted psychology, a complete system of dehumanization, all in the name of profit.
But it's so easy to think of this as just history, something that happened a long time ago. It's not. The violation of human dignity is still happening, right now. The excuses might be different. Today it might be in the name of national security or social norms, but the act of stripping people of their rights, that continues. I mean, just look at this contrast. On one hand, you have the promise, written into international law, like the Geneva Conventions, which clearly forbids outrages upon human dignity. But on the other hand, you have the breach. During the War on Terror, prisoners were simply told, you don't fall under the Geneva Conventions. Suddenly, those universal rights weren't so universal anymore. They became conditional. That dark side was created, a place where the rules just didn't apply. And this isn't just about war. Think about this number, 76. Right now, in 76 countries, it is a crime to be gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender. 76 places on Earth where simply being who you are and loving who you love can land you in prison.
And in 7 of those countries, the penalty is death. The methods change, the excuses change, but the fundamental breach of the promise is exactly the same. One group of people deciding another group doesn't deserve basic human rights.
But, and this is so important, this story is not just about oppression, because wherever you find that breach, you find something else too. You find resistance. It's this incredible, enduring testament to the human spirit, that refusal to be broken, to be erased.
And resistance wasn't just one thing. Sometimes it was big, explosive stuff, like the revolt in Santo Domingo that created Haiti, the very first republic to ban slavery. But it was also the small, daily acts of defiance and sabotage. And maybe most powerfully, it was cultural resistance. Keeping your music, your religion, your language alive, that was a profound way of screaming, I am still human, in the face of a system trying to turn you into an object.
And that's what's so powerful about it. Their resistance revealed a fundamental truth. It proved that the lack of humanity wasn't in the people who were enslaved, it was in the oppressors. Resistance wasn't just fighting back, it was the ultimate proof of their own dignity. And that legacy, that spirit of resistance, is absolutely alive today. The fight continues in the ongoing struggle against racism, against all forms of discrimination, and against modern slavery that still, right now, treats people like products. The battle to make the promise of human rights real for everyone, it is far from over. Which leaves us with a really big question to think about. If we know that the promise of human dignity will constantly be under attack, that there will always be a breach, then how do we make sure that the promise of resistance is just as constant? How do we make the fight for dignity as enduring as the forces that try to crush it?